We mentioned in the return stage that the return stage begins with the Decree of Cyrus. So I wanted to spend a little bit longer talking about the Decree of Cyrus and what it means. Um, from Wikipedia, it said Cyrus the Great is said in the Bible to have liberated the Jews from the Babylonian captivity to resettle and rebuild Jerusalem, earning him an honored place in Judaism. And I've already alluded to the fact that when the Jewish people returned, the Jewish province never rebelled against the Persian Empire. Lots of other provinces rebelled from time to time, but the Jewish people always felt loyal because Cyrus had shown them such great mercy in allowing them to return to their homeland. This is the tomb of Cyrus the Great, and it is still there to check out if you get opportunity to travel to Ecbatana. So what's interesting about the Decree of Cyrus is Isaiah actually predicts it some 170 years before Cyrus comes on the scene. So Isaiah is showing that God has a sovereign quality in which he can tell the end from the beginning, and he can name the successor to the Babylonians, who are the successors to Assyrians, who are contemporary. Remember, the Assyrians were the contemporary threat in Isaiah's time. Two more empires will come and go. The Assyrians will come and go. The Babylonians will come and go, and God will see that far into the future to be able to talk about what will happen with Cyrus and the Persian kingdom. Listen as I read. This is Isaiah 44, verses 24 through chapter 25 and verse 7. Thus says the Lord, your Redeemer, who formed you from the womb. I am the Lord who made all things, who alone stretched out the heavens, who spread out the earth by himself, who frustrates the signs of liars and makes fools of diviners, who turns wise men back and makes their knowledge foolish, who confirms the word of his servant and fulfills the counsel of his messengers, who says of Jerusalem, she shall be inhabited, and of the cities of Judah they shall be built, and I will raise up their ruins, who says to the deep, be dry, I will dry up your rivers, who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he shall fulfill all my purpose, saying of Jerusalem, she shall be built, and of the temple your foundation shall be laid. Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have grasped, to subdue nations before him, and to loose the belts of kings, to open doors before him that gates may not be closed. I will go before you, and level the exalted places. I will break in pieces the doors of bronze and cut through the bars of iron. I will give you the treasures of darkness and the hoards in secret places, that you may know that it is I, the Lord, the God of Israel, who call you by name, for the sake of my servant Jacob and Israel my chosen. I call you by your name. I name you, though you do not know me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. Besides me, there is no God. I equip you, though you do not know me, that people may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is none besides me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. I form light and create darkness. I make well-being and create calamity. I, the Lord, I am the Lord who does all these things. Is that incredible? This is a picture of God choosing Cyrus in the future to fulfill God's purpose in the fact that Jerusalem would be rebuilt. Cyrus would be a conquering king. He would have the God of Israel at his side, unknowingly in his mind, but God will use him to accomplish his purposes. It's an incredible prediction, as I said, 170 years before Cyrus is even on the scene. When the decree of Cyrus is actually issued, it comes during the first year of his reign, and the declaration allows any Jews who will to return and to help build the temple. Cyrus even gives the vessels of the temple. They still have them. They're still in storage. They're part of the treasure that was Babylon and now Persia. Things that Nebuchadnezzar had captured and had taken back to Babylon to put in the house of his God. And now all of those vessels Cyrus gives back to God's people to take back with them to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. In fact, I'd like to read that declaration to give you again some of the dramatic sense of what that declaration could mean. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and also put it in writing. Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a home at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever is among you of all his people, may his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem. And let each survivor in whatever place he sojourns be assisted by the men of his place with silver and gold, with goods and with beasts, besides freewill offerings for the house of God that is in Jerusalem. Then rose up the heads of the fathers' houses of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites, everyone whose spirit God had stirred to go up to rebuild the house of the Lord that is in Jerusalem. And all who were about him, aided with the vessels of silver, with gold, with goods, with beasts, with costly wares, besides all that was freely offered. Cyrus the king also brought out the vessels of the house of the Lord that Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem, and placed in the house of his gods. Cyrus, king of Persia, brought these out in the charge of Mithredath, the treasurer, who counted them out to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. And this was the number of them: 30 basins of gold, 1,000 basins of silver, 29 censers, 30 bowls of gold, 410 bowls of silver, and 1,000 other vessels. All the vessels of gold and silver were 5,400. All this did Sheshbazzar bring up when the exiles were brought up from Babylonia to Jerusalem. Isn't that incredible? It's a pretty detailed decree, and it happens in the first year, it says, of Cyrus' reign. In this picture is the cylinder of Cyrus, which is a cylinder that declares Cyrus to be the legitimate king of Babylon. You remember the collapse of Babylon under Belshazzar and the arrival of Persia. And so this declares Cyrus to be the legitimate king of Babylon. And now, as that legitimate king of Babylon, he's ordered that the temple's resources be restored to the temple and returned to Jerusalem, where they came from. So they go back and begin to rebuild the temple, but it takes some time. And the temple repair is opposed by the peoples around them. They hate to see the temple repair. They hate to see the walls around the city because they are a threat to what they believe the lands that they've been holding. And so the work is stopped when they send a letter to Artaxerxes, and the work stops. It takes 20 years eventually for the temple to be built, and it begins again when somebody asks Darius to check the court records of Cyrus to see if there really was such a decree. And in palace intrigue, it seems like that decree has been stored in an out-of-the-way place, as if somebody intended it not to be found. But when it is found, Darius puts forth a decree to begin the work again, and that the people in the areas around Israel and Judah should help to provide whatever is needed and draw from his own resources, whatever is needed in order that things might be rebuilt. And this is how that reads. Here's the declaration. So now, therefore, Tattenai, governor of the province beyond the river, you and your associates, the governors who are in the province beyond the river, keep away. Let the work on this house of God alone. Let the governor of the Jews and the elders of the Jews rebuild this house on its site. Moreover, I make a decree regarding what you shall do for these elders of the Jews for the rebuilding of this house of God. The cost is to be paid to these men in full and without delay from the royal revenue, the tribute of the province from beyond the river, and whatever is needed, bulls, rams, or sheep for burnt offerings to the God of heaven, wheat, salt, wine, or oil, as the priests at Jerusalem require. Let that be given to them day by day without fail, that they may offer pleasing sacrifices to the God of heaven and pray for the life of the king and his sons. I find that phrase incredible, that the pagan king of Persia desires that the temple at Jerusalem be rebuilt so that the God of heaven might preserve the life of the king and the life of the king's sons. So while it takes 20 years to get the temple rebuilt, Zerubbabel's temple is completed in 516 BC, and that's just the beginning of the story of the return of God's people. Thanks for listening.